Greetings, everyone. This is Glenna here, and I'm here with John Stapleton, who's our presenter today, and with Layla, who you know is our project officer here at Prosper. We're just going to sign on and say a brief hello before we start our presentation. Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Layla. Good morning. We're looking forward to our session today. We're going to have our webcam off for most of the broadcast, but we wanted to make sure and do a personal hello. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to John. He's looking forward to sharing his learnings with you. He's been with this material for quite a while, and he's presented it to many audiences here in the GTA and around Ontario. So he's going to share with us some additional learnings that he's had from presenting to various audiences. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to John.
Okay, good morning, everyone. What I have here is basically a mashup of slides. And what I mean by that, I've taken slides that I use for a post-mortem from last year in presenting retirement on a low income to the to people at Toronto libraries. And I have another tour this year where I have 9 different events, and afterwards we'll make sure that you get a copy of where the library events. In fact, one of them is today at 6:30. So.
Oh, sorry, John, I just want to interrupt for one moment. Just wanted to remind everyone that we will have time for questions at the end of the session. John's going to present for about an hour, and then we've got about a half an hour reserved for questions. So at any time, if you do have a question that you want to type in, you'll see in the webinar interface there on the right-hand side of your screen, there's a place for you to type in questions. So feel free to do that at any time, and then when we have our question period, we'll do questions one at a time. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that in advance. All right, thanks, John. Take it away.
Okay, I'm actually at the library at College in Spadina, which I think is called Lillian Smith Library, and I'm not expecting a large audience, you know, when you have the Blue Jays and the wild card game and Adele at the ACC. Yeah. So there'll probably be a couple of chairs extra for those of you who get really excited by this material today. So as I said, it's a mashup of my learnings from last year doing retirement on a low income, and that came out of originally some work that I did with HouseLink, with both their staff and people who were residents at HouseLink. Some of the things that I've discovered in doing that. The main thing I'm going to do is tell you what some of those learnings are, and then try to give you a way to actually familiarize and actually introduce taxes and the personal tax system to people, which is very, very complicated and very hard to understand. But what I've done is try to make it the tax system, use the analogy of going to the grocery store. And when I go into these seminars, I basically ask 2 questions. And the first question is, do people understand what a parallel universe is? And there's always somebody who reads science fiction who knows what a parallel universe is. And then a particular type of parallel universe is the parallel universe of where everything is opposite to the way that it is on Earth. And that's what I tell them, because for those people who actually will collect the guaranteed income supplement, that's 32% of Canadians, so it's almost a third. In many ways, they live in a parallel universe. So the other thing that I do is I talk to them about, first of all, ask how many people do their taxes. It's always, for people who do their own taxes, it's always less than half, and many of them who use software like TurboTax or some of the more popular ones, the free tax services, often admit that they just type in numbers and have absolutely no idea what they're doing except transferring one number from one sheet to another sheet. So that's really not understanding your taxes. The problem is for somebody who, whether they're on OW or ODSP or some other sort of benefit program before they turn 65, and especially if they're on GIS and perhaps gains after age 65, what we find is that a knowledge of the tax system is really helpful. And when you start to tell them about how to retire on a low income, or think of that, especially once they reach the age of 50 or 55, and they're not buying lottery tickets and plan to win big, they need to understand the tax system. And so my retirement on a low income seminar, unfortunately, for people who don't understand the personal income tax system, it's like going in at the third rung of the ladder and starting to climb from there. So I try to introduce that as part of it, but when I have my druthers, as I did last week in Perth, I was able to do the tax system in the morning and then do retiring on a low income in the afternoon, and it makes it an awful lot easier. So one of my first experiences, now let's see, we're trying to turn this forward.
Oh, here we go.
Oh, okay. A quote attributed to Mark Twain in the opening of the movie The Big Short. For any of you who saw The Big Short, it comes right up at the beginning of the movie, and it sort of became an infamous quote because Mark Twain scholars, Samuel Clemens scholars, discovered that he actually didn't say it. And so that there was a controversy. So I say attributed to Mark Twain. And this is what I found, and when I saw the movie, I said, oh my Lord, that's my seminars. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And so I just find a whole lot of people who come to the various seminars, people who came to the House Link, people who I've done this at CAMH, who've had mental health issues and lived experience of poverty, low income, and you start to tell them things. And the reason this quote's so apt is because if you listen to commercials and you watch TV and you walk into a bank or a credit union, you often see brochures and various types of advertising prompts that that tell you that you should do certain things, and I'm there saying that they're in a parallel universe, and they and in fact all the things they're being told to do they shouldn't do, and so there's an awful lot of resistance to that. This has been an important quote for me as I've gone. This is a very sensitive machine.
Let's hear it. Let's see.
I think
there you go. Number 3.
That's 3? Okay.
Yeah.
So this comes out of, some of these learnings come out of 5 presentations that I did between September and October of 2015, and so this is the fall season in 2016, and I still have 7 libraries to go, so I certainly welcome you all to either come tonight or come to one of the other ones that's more conveniently located for you. So at the Albion Public Library, which is a low-income area, we had 85 people. It was 35 over registration, 35 people at Cedar Brae, West and Mount Dennis. You'll all notice that these are areas that are either in what we used to call the priority neighborhoods or the policy or the poverty by postal code, and now called the NIAs, which is neighborhood improvement areas in Toronto. So first of all, there's an incredible demand for this, and it's not me, I can tell you that. It's this is the largest daytime audience for a library event at West and Mount Dennis, and part of the issue is that there's so much pent-up demand for people. Of that, 32% of Canadians who are actually retiring on a low income. And for any of you who saw the Vital Signs report that came out this morning, you'll know that poverty has continued to increase in the Toronto area. So there really is a demand for this type of information. So at the Asian Court Public Library, again, what we usually see is that that of the people registered, I'm always warned that we're going to have fewer people actually attend the seminar, and we were consistently going over registration. And in this case, it's mostly seniors and near seniors, some there for themselves and some for relatives. Again, 35 to 40%, depends on the audience, say they file their own taxes. Almost 100%, there's always a man between 50 and 70 who doesn't put up his hand when I ask the question, do you shop at grocery stores or places like Shoppers Drug Mart, etc. But most people put up their hand, and that's why this way of teaching the tax system is so universally successful. In Toronto, majority are immigrants and visible minorities, but I can tell you when I go out of town, it's almost all the rural folk are almost all from here, and they don't have the issues related to coming to Canada as an adult. The sessions are highly interactive. They're raucous. I have to do a lot of what I call air traffic control because the people have these very, very specific questions about their own situation. You know, they move from one country to another country, then to Canada, then move back to another country, then move back to Canada, and they want to know when they turn 65 how much money they're going to get, and they think I'm going to come out with a number. So I have to, there's a lot of air traffic control that goes on in the audience where we say we're going to park that for a while, then we're going to send it over to our question period, and then I try to take them one by one. Then the sessions usually dissolve, and there's a whole bunch of people I usually spend, if I'm lucky, if I can get out within an hour. Okay, next slide. So the key learnings, and I think all of you have seen this who are involved in this area, is that very few people understand and are often afraid. If you remember, there's a Bank of Nova Scotia commercial where the issue of getting a second opinion, and the person holds on to their finances in a folder and sort of gingerly passes it over to the banker as if they're afraid of what's in the paper. And that's what we're facing. So that very few understand, and they're often afraid, respecting what they need to know, what they know and need to know of what I call the 4 pillars of our public and private citizen-facing financial systems. 2 systems and 2 sets of instruments. It's the overlap between these 4 and some of the same terminology that gets used that really is the issue here. And so we have a personal income tax system, and that is a pillar of our public finances system in Canada. And it contains such things, and this is not the definitive, of exemptions, deductions, refundable credits, non-refundable credits, such things as RRSP room, and so that's one particular part of the system. And then there's the Canada-Ontario Income Security System, and that's what I'm trying to acquaint them with, which is Old Age Security, the Guaranteed Income Supplement, Canada Pension Plan, something called the allowance, it used to be called Spouse's Allowance, and treatment of other income and the effects on, for example, rent, guaranteed income, rent, social assistance, inheritance, etc. So the Canada and Ontario's income security system, it differs before 65 and after 65, and also for children, of course, and the various different rules that affect it are all part of that Canada-Ontario income security system. A third pillar is tax instruments. Okay, so so what you can do to lower your taxes in various ways, and by having a registered instrument. And registered instruments include, they usually start with R, but they don't all start with R. Registered retirement savings plans, registered education savings plans, the tax-free savings account, which is the one that doesn't start with an R, the RDSP, which is a registered disability savings plan, and finally when your RRSP chariot turns into a pumpkin at age 71 and you're in the Chicago government, you have something called a RIF, or a Registered Retirement Income Fund. And I do tell people who come to the seminar, I said, if you're 71 or over, you're coming here out of interest in finding out what you should have done as opposed to what you can now do, because you're at 71 in our system, you're generally speaking locked in. And the fourth pillar, of course, is what I can't talk about without going to jail, because I don't have those letters behind my name. But that's stocks, bonds, guaranteed income certificates, annuities, mutual funds, the sort of things they sell at a bank or a brokerage, or you can have a personal advisor do something like that. I find that the people who come are often disappointed that I'm unable to tell them about that, and they want to know where to put their money, and they often confuse the various different pillars of the system, as you're going to see upcoming. So next slide. So just a little bit about the audience. They were highly motivated to learn. They're very active, and were, as I said, very anxious about their situation. Many had received bad advice. We were just talking earlier about how TurboTax talks about putting money into an RRSP and filling up your RRSP room, which is absolutely wrong for anybody who's going to be retiring on a low income. So you can get bad advice anywhere. Really interesting point is that most people, especially lower income people, are fee resistant. And the banks, I think, and credit unions and other advisors have really gone into this area of making their money on the instruments themselves as opposed to the advice that they give. And so I found, and this is the term that private advisors do use, this is this quote-unquote fee resistance. And they'll ask whether a person, when I go to send somebody to an advisor when they have a really complicated situation, the advisors that I use will always ask if the person is fee resistant. But I keep telling people that if they walk into a place where they get the advice for free, it's probably worth what they paid for it. So think about that and get them to think about that. Most did not think they have to pay for information or assistance when in some of the library sessions that the Rotary Club of Toronto had not paid for the material that I had in place. I had to charge a couple of bucks because I was paying for my own work that I was doing otherwise, and people would often tell me, oh, I'm low income, I don't have to pay. So that was interesting. Most were resistant to giving up long-held but completely incorrect information that they had internalized. This is really important, and how do you get people out of that situation where either two things. Even if they believe what I'm saying, they're still immobilized. If they're in RRSPs and they're heading to age 65 and they could easily get out of them because they're low income and the RRSP is not going to take them to a point where they're taxable, they're still immobilized. Often that relates to who does the taxes for them. You'll have people like, oh, my brother's always done my taxes. Well, there's not many brothers out there and uncles that know about GIS, I've learned. They're uniformly highly grateful for the presentation, expressing loud gratitude to either me or other people that have done these with me. And but even that gratitude does not necessarily translate into any action on their part. So moving on, 60 to 65% do not file their taxes themselves and don't understand the basics of the personal tax system. 35 to 40% file their own taxes, but again, with the software, and as the software gets better, all they do is they are transferring numbers or getting one of the children to transfer them numbers, and it's just putting it on the screen. So here's the most significant point, that not one of the 284 people could meaningfully explain the difference between exemptions, deductions, non-refundable credits, and refundable credits. And our system only had exemptions and deductions up until 1986 when we had massive tax reform. And instead of getting rid of exemptions and deductions, it added non-refundable credits and refundable credits to the system in a widespread basis. And all four mean different things. And again, when asked to name examples of the above, more than 50% of the examples were wrong. People would answer, that's like when. That's how they start out and so if I give money to a charity, etc., they would say that was a deduction when it's not. It's a non-refundable credit. And of course, there's a real big difference between the two. None of the 284 could provide an accurate definition of any of those four terms: exemptions, deductions, non-refundable credits, and refundable credits. Now, they're always in the news. Bill Morneau, our finance minister, was on this morning talking about changing the exemption to owner-occupied principal residence, and he correctly used the term exemption. Often the terms are interchangeably used and incorrectly used, but Bill Morneau gets full marks this morning for actually having the right word with the right example. And so people are going to have to hold on to their principal residence for more than about 20 minutes and taking a selfie in a house they've bought and flipped, and in order to get that exemption. And otherwise, it would be subject to something called capital gains tax, which is part of the personal tax system. So on we go. So personal taxes go to the grocery store. This is what I've found to be the most powerful way. The idea of calling a refundable credit a gift card and a non-refundable credit a store coupon, I did not come up with that. I heard about it at a seminar out in Calgary, and the more I thought of it, the more I thought that I would run with it, and then try to do the same thing for deductions and exemptions, and try to create them into cards of various sort that people could look at, cards or coupons. And then I also extended that to entitlements and deeds or certificates of possession, so that we would actually have a stylized paper example. I then laminate them and hand them around the room and try to get people to understand their taxes by thinking about shopping and what they do when they shop. Because people understand what shopping is, but they don't understand what their taxes is. So here we go. When asking people about a refundable credit, the term refundable, although it's not a misnomer, it almost is. Because people get refunds when their taxes are filed each year, and those refunds are really a combination of non-refundable and refundable credits. Because when you file for your taxes, a program like, for example, the Working Income Tax Benefit, which is refundable, is going to be part of the filing of your tax return, and any money that you get from that is going to come out from that. The same is true for Trillium benefits, GST credits and things, some of which are paid later, as you know. And then, of course, their non-refundable credits are used to reduce the amount of tax that they have. So when we go into the grocery store, I talk about the refundable credits being the same as a gift card. So, and we discussed the whole idea of, well, what is a gift card? Well, a gift card, you can buy it, and then you can buy anything in the store. And that's when I try to get the definition of a refundable credit is a credit that you can receive regardless of your tax liability. Okay, so it's that's the key point in the definition. Whereas the non-refundable credit is a credit that can only reduce your taxes. So there's a picture of what I call the gift card. Canada Revenue Agency has actually seen my presentation, and a staff member, a senior staff member, deemed it to be interesting, but also warned not to get too close to making it look real. So I think if anybody saw this, one of these on the street, and then tried to take it to the government, of course it doesn't say an amount or anything like that. So it's highly stylized, and it's just it's something that people can, when they're laminated, they can look at and feel them. And so on the back of the government card, I give some ideas of what a tax-free refundable tax credits. And the reason I said tax-free is that a lot of people still ask, are refundable credits taxed? And they're not. They're basically, in many ways, money that is just taking the tax system and is using the tax system to get money to put into people's hands. And so GST and HST credits, and there's no real rules here. There's just some that are and some that aren't. And in this case, GST and HST credits is a tax-free quarterly payment. In Ontario, we took the first refundable credit in Canada was actually in Ontario in 1971. which was called the old Ontario Property and Sales Tax Credits, and that they put that with the energy, merged it in 2011 to create the Trillium benefit, and as a payment for low-income people who own or rent a principal residence in Ontario. Another example of a working income, of a refundable credit is the working income tax benefit. That's a payment to eligible working low-income individuals and families. So in many ways they work the same as entitlements, but they're paid through the tax system, and it's just using the tax mechanism to get money to people. So these are amounts that are income tested, but they don't really have anything to do with the taxes that you pay in any way, shape, or form. If you pay no tax, you can get a refundable credit. Some people who pay tax will get refundable credits based on how high their income is. But the key difference is that you can get a refundable credit regardless of whether you pay tax. So moving on to the non-refundable credit, we have what I call the tax coupon. And it always goes something. I'm going to give you the most common example of a confusion that I find with low-income people is that they will take a whole bunch of transit transfers and payments and Metro passes and Presto and put it in a bag, and the person will be, say, on OW or ODSP or receiving some sort of compensation that's not taxable, and they will take these into a nonprofit tax clinic. They'll take them into H&R Block. They'll take them into the guy in the mall, and they'll present them. And of course, what we all know, as soon as you find out the person is on government benefits, and it means that they don't pay any tax in the first place. And because they don't pay any tax in the first place, then having a credit that will actually reduce their taxes is superfluous. It just doesn't mean anything. And so I explained this to a group of low-income people in HouseLink and their staff members there, and got all these knit brows looking up at me until I said, okay, if you go into a grocery store and you see a $1 coupon for Tide detergent, can you take that $1 Tide coupon up to the cashier and ask for a loonie? And they all say no immediately. So they understand the idea of non-refundability. Coupons are all non-refundable. You have to buy Tide. The only way that you're going to get the dollar off with the coupon is you have to buy the item in the first place. And in this instance, that is the point. That's the aha moment where the person actually says, okay, I get it now. I understand it. In the government store, and this is the Government Canada store, if you come in with a coupon and all your non-refundable credits are coupons, it means it will reduce your taxes. But if you already pay no tax, then the problem is you're going to is that it's superfluous. So what some of the well-meaning clinics have done is to say, well, you don't really need that bag of stuff. You just take it back with you, or I can throw it out into the garbage here. And the person will, they're sort of disappointed. And what I found is a number of people will actually go into the malls, and because they prey on people who don't understand the tax system, that person will say, oh, I'll take your bag of coupons and I'll make sure you get everything you're supposed to get back from them. So often you find that the places that do it for profit are preying on people's lack of knowledge of what a non-refundable credit is, and then actually take the business away from the place that would have done it for them for free. And that's really kind of a shame. So some examples of the non-refundable tax credits, the coupon, that can only be used to reduce your taxes paid. Well, of course, the big one, and it's not on here, is the T1 that everybody, when they start to be employed, you get your you get a basic non-refundable credit that's about somewhere about $12,000. There'll be members of the audience who know exactly what that amount is, and it changes according to such things as age, disability, number of kids, and that sort of thing. So one that's actually, I'm going to have to change this presentation because the child fitness tax credit was ended in the last budget. But of course, you have the medical expense tax credit, and some people will know that there's a part of the medical expense tax credit that actually is refundable. But for most people, the medical expense tax credit is a non-refundable credit, which means it can only be used to reduce your taxes. You can't get it outside of that. The education tax credit, the famous transit pass tax credit, which is most misunderstood, I find, by low-income people. Charitable donations, again, is a non-refundable credit. And disability tax credit, the DTC, depending on the expense paid out, is a non-refundable credit. The spousal tax credit and the caregiver tax credit. So they're all called tax credits in the system, but they're non-refundable, meaning that they can only reduce the amount of taxes you pay. And there's another important point about a non-refundable tax, and that's why the coupon analogy works so well, and that is that if we were to take the richest person in Canada and walks into a grocery store and picks up a coupon for Tide, then that is going to be worth $1 to that person. And if you take the poorest person in Canada who goes in and buys Tide with that $1 coupon, it's worth $1 off. So non-refundable tax credits are worth the same to all of us, but not so for deductions, which is the next point. Now, some of you perhaps who shop at the Bay or some other places that actually reward your the amount that you will buy with a particular retailer, for example, you'll find that sometimes they will give you a different amount. You'll get 15 or 20 or 25%, where someone who doesn't shop there regularly might get 5 or 10%. So this is the concept of where the amount that the tax credit is actually worth comes up in the idea of a deduction. So whereas a non-refundable credit is like a coupon that's worth the same to the rich or the poor, a deduction is worth much, much more to someone who is rich, who, let's say, is paying taxes at a 46% rate. Because if someone gets a $1,000 deduction, for example, and they're in the 46% tax rate, the value of a $1,000 deduction is going to be $460 off their taxes. But for the very poor, let's say a person who's paying at the 25% rate of tax, then that deduction is going to be worth $250. And of course, for a person who has no taxable income, the deduction is worth $0. It's not worth anything. And the big problem here for people is, especially for those who have gotten into RRSPs at earlier in life, often the value of the deduction wasn't really worth all that much at all, and or nothing. But the problem is that when they then get out of when they turn 65 and start cashing in their RRSPs, it reduces their guaranteed income supplement at 50 cents on the dollar. So the whole idea of anyone who is GIS bound, by that I mean that they that their income for a single person is about $17,500 outside of their old age security. For anyone who is GIS bound, it means that they will have gotten very little for their RRSP when they took it out, but it will be when they cash it in, it will reduce their benefits by 50% on the dollar, and sometimes much more than that. And we'll get into that in a bit. So an example of this particular type of card is the idea of childcare still has a deduction, and it depends on the expenses. It's not a non-refundable credit. RRSPs are a deduction, and that depends on the amount contributed based on your income tax statement. So in other words, it's worth more to the rich than it is to the poor. It's worth more to the higher taxpayer than the lower taxpayer. and for the person who pays tax, it's worthless, just like a non-refundable credit. But the difference between a deduction and a non-refundable credit is a non-refundable credit is always worth the same amount in the reduction to tax, and a deduction varies. So just to give some other ideas, Tfsa, there's no deduction. The income inside of Tfsa is not subject to tax, and that's somewhat the same as the RESP. There's no deduction. So there's certain registered instruments like RRSPs where you get a deduction, and others like TFSAs and RESPs where there's no deduction. At least in the case of the RESP, you can get the Canada Learning Bond and the Canada Education Savings Grants as a matching contribution. So that brings us to the next slide, which I call the forget about it card, which is an exemption. And what do we mean by exemptions? Now, exemptions used to have a very specialized meaning back before 1986, but ever since then it really means income that you don't have to report. And there's all kinds of different income that you don't report, and on the next slide we have some examples of it. So if you go out to the racetrack and you have a big winning day, you don't have to report that on your income tax. So there is a spot on the tax form that says other income, but don't put it in. They're not interested. And here's a big one that's in the news, the sale of your principal residence. You'll now have to, there was a rule that say you have a principal residence in Canada even though you had a principal residence in another country. You can no longer do that as of the announcements today. It's going to take place later in the month, October 17th, I believe. And you also have to stay in your principal residence for a certain amount of time. In other words, you can't buy you can't be renting in an apartment and then buy a principal residence and not live in it. And that was apparently a problem in Vancouver where we had houses that were not occupied. So so that rule is changing, but still, so that it's narrowing, but it's still considered to be an exemption if you follow the new rules. The sale of your car, garage sale proceeds, and any form of reimbursed expenses where you pay out something and then get paid back, those are things you don't need to report, and that's why we call it an exemption from reporting. Now, moving away from the tax system, I've included yet another card to help people with low income understand, well, anyone really, to understand how entitlements really work. And so the analogy I've used is the certificate of possession, like a deed. And this is documentary evidence of ownership. It's like an entitlement card. And entitlements are somewhat different than the benefits that we get through the tax system, either refundable or non-refundable. And ever since 1978, all of our new benefits have been in the form of tax credits, either non-refundable or refundable tax credits. And all of our new instruments, of course, have been in the tax system. So the last entitlement that was actually put into place was the Guaranteed Income Supplement in 1969 and 1970. And entitlements are different from refundable credits because you have to apply for them separately. All the refundable credits and non-refundable credits, deductions, exemptions, all of that, you apply for the benefit how? By filing your taxes. That is how you apply for them in the first place. But for an entitlement that is not part of the tax system, those that came before 1969, you have to apply for them separately. Now, before Canada used the tax system to pay benefits out, all you had were various types of entitlements. In social insurance, for example, EI and CPP are entitlements that you have to apply for separately, and they have their own set of rules. The same is true for old age security. The same is true for guaranteed income supplement. These are the ones where you have to actually apply for them separately. So in our ordinary daily life, there are certain things that we own that we have some sort of documentary evidence for. One is vehicle ownership. One is a deed or a lease for a home. We own our bank statements. We own our receipts. We own our proof of purchase cards. These are things that we own that tell certain things about what we own. And for example, if we buy a computer at the store and somebody tells us, oh, well, that's my computer, well, you pull out your proof of purchase and or your receipt and you say, well, no, that is mine, that sort of thing. So entitlement programs kind of work in the same way. So you apply for old age security at 64 years and 2 months, unless you have all sorts of complicated problems with your birth certificate, which you should clear up beforehand. And the guaranteed income supplement you apply for separately. Where do you apply for it? You apply for it by ticking a box on the old age security card. EI and CPP, of course, as being social insurance programs, you apply for them separately. Assistive devices you apply for. The Canada Learning Bond you apply for once you've taken out an RESP. Canada Education Savings Grants come along with that. Disability grants of various sorts, all of social assistance you have to apply for, and in many cases go through steep processes. Even the seniors drug card doesn't always come automatically. So what are some of the things that that actually are the same between entitlements and other ownership, like a deed or a lease or a vehicle ownership? First of all, you have to apply for it. You have to apply to get an entitlement. You also have to apply for having a license to be able to drive your car, and you have to apply for your ownership certificate. You have to meet ongoing eligibility requirements. That's true of driving a car. It's also true of old age security, the guaranteed income supplement, or EI or CPP. So in many ways, the things you own and have a certificate of possession or a deed are very much like your entitlements. You have to file tax returns. You have to show documentation. You have to pay property tax, and if you own a home, you have to pay license fees every year or 2 years. If you want to keep driving your car, you got a sticker that you got to put on the back of it. So in each case, for anything you own, for most things we own, especially the big things, it's very much like our entitlements that one must apply. You must meet ongoing eligibility requirements. You must file tax returns. You must show documentation. Try getting stopped by the police in your car and not being able to show your insurance certificate, your ownership, and your license. You'll receive a fine under the Highway Traffic Act. And of course, you have to update your documentation. You can't let it lapse. That's true for entitlement programs. It's also true for things that you own. The reason I use this is because I'm trying to tell people that those things that are entitlements, like old age security, EI, CPP, and the GIS, they should consider themselves as owners of those things. And I often find that people look at them as somehow privileges or something that maybe I'm not really, that's not really mine if if I'm applying for them, the government can take them away and that sort of thing, which they can't. I mean, if you meet the eligibility criteria for the guaranteed income supplement, then it's much like owning your car. Yeah, you have to complete the documentation, you have to pay, you have to show documentation, and you have to update the documentation. So in many ways, entitlements are like owning things. So moving on, so those are the tools that I use in terms of either going to the grocery store, and then that one last one that is related to a certificate of possession or a deed. So what I'm trying to do is, rather than teach people about the tax system or about the entitlement system in either an abstract way or in a way so that they understand it separately, I'm trying to take the things they already know. They know how, I've never met a person that didn't know how a coupon worked, that didn't know that a coupon was different than a gift card, that didn't know that there were specialized coupons, or that there are certain things they didn't have to report. Everybody knows that, and everybody knows about owning something like a car and what you have to do to keep it updated. So you'll get people who will say things like, well, I didn't know I had to update my my eligibility for a particular entitlement. And I said, well, you have to for anything else you own, so you might as well think of it that way. So it puts them in touch with something they already know, and then they are able to carry that to the tax system and then understand it. So I'm telling them that your thought balloon, when you're thinking about if somebody says non-refundable credit, you think coupon. Your thought balloon for a refundable credit like Trillium is a gift card. Your thought balloon for a deduction is something that's different between the rich guy and the poorer person, and that the exemption is the forget about it. You don't have to report it. So what I find in these is that people at the sessions that I've done for both people with disabilities, lived experience of poverty and mental illness, and low-income seniors, is that they confuse the personal income tax system with the income security system, investment instruments, and tax instruments. So here's an issue. Confusion between systems. Somebody will always say at one of my sessions, you didn't say whether I should get a GIC or an RRSP. Well, a GIC is a financial instrument, and the RRSP is a tax instrument. So they're part of different systems. So it's of course you can put a GIC in an RRSP. So that's important to understand those four pillars. I was told I could deduct my rent off my taxes. Is that true? Well, first of all, it's not a deduction, and it's a refundable credit that you get for as part of Trillium. So they're using different terminology of those parts of those elements of the tax system, and they're mixing them up. Can you put your charitable receipts into your RSP? Well, one's a non-refundable credit that's only used for taking your money off your tax, and of course you have to put real money in your RSP. So again, confusing it. I got a tax refund, but my GIS is below the maximum. I took it to my MP, but he's useless. He did nothing. Again, the tax refund has nothing to do with whether your GIS is below the maximum. It might be the same, it might not be. So that's the confusion between systems. The second one, it's clear that many low-income seniors do not understand the most basic elements, but they often feel strongly about how they think it works. It's back to that Mark Twain quote, that people are damaged by what they know for sure that just isn't so. So in order to even begin that personal voyage, I try to take them through those four elements of the tax system with the gift card and the coupon, etc. And then the next thing that happens is that all of the pillars interact with each other. It's like OAS is taxable, RRSP is feature or deduction, refundable credits are a feature of our income security system, but the role and function of the four pillars must be first understood. They're often incorrect, and those biases must be addressed. So in other words, if you can get people to separate those four pillars and then take them to the grocery store, you sometimes get some traction with people. So confusion within systems and instruments. You got to remember there's no one amongst 284 motivated attendees. These are people who are coming off on night and coming on their own dime. If they can't explain the essential differences between the exemption, the deduction, and various credits, and can give examples of each of those four, or consistently give incorrect examples, they won't begin to understand how those four tax features relate to our tax and investments instruments, our income security system, and such things as our RSP room, and the documentation that's required for any of all that. So that's important. So some examples: I'm receiving social assistance and I save all my transit receipts like I'm supposed to. Well, who told them to? One tax place takes them and the other one told me to keep them. I'm going back to the place that takes them so I get a bigger refund. Untrue, of course. My girlfriend deducts her car, but they told me at Revenue Canada that I can't. How come she gets to do it but not me? Well, the girlfriend is going to have a small business and be a sole proprietor in a business where they can deduct their working expenses. So that's not understanding the different types of taxation that there can be. How many years do you have to work in Canada before you get old age? Well, old age security is based on residency. It's not based on work. So that's just a rule that you have to know. And somebody's saying, I worked for cash all my life, and now you're saying I can't get CPP and my MP won't help. Can you help? Well, no. CPP is a payroll tax. It comes off your employment, your wages, or your self-employment, and because it's contribution-based, you can only get it if you did contribute. So that's important. But again, it's separating all these things. So it's clear that a general lack of working knowledge of very fundamental concepts is hampering people. But the problem is that our financial institutions do not ask or know about Canada's income security system when selling them products, even though it's fundamental to the customer's financial status. So for the banks, for example, and sometimes credit unions too, or others, they stay, in my view, and I guess it'll be a bit controversial here, is they're willfully ignorant of these things. I frequently take people into their banks and shadow them so that they'll make the right decisions, and have people in the bank not know what the guaranteed income supplement is or how it works, and it's vitally important for people in that 32% of Canadians. So not knowing what effect, how things will be different for 32% of Canadians is really important. Next is that Service Canada advises people to get financial advice in the marketplace. Well, that marketplace, it just simply doesn't exist. They're going to have to get it from people like me, people like you, people that Prosper Canada works with and funds, etc. And financial literacy programs often shortcut a fundamental understanding of systems and instruments by simply saying what they are, like file your tax return. Well, great help. I mean, they don't tell them that this is how you apply for benefits. It just says file your tax return, like make it a rule. So that is telling them what to do, but not why, and what will happen as a result, that this is how you're applying for benefits. Or advising people to file their tax return and apply for benefits regardless of negative consequences. I had a particular example in HouseLink where a guy had multiple debts, and once he filed for his taxes, he went on the grid, and the next thing you know, he was 2 a.m. in the morning getting calls from collection agencies. Here's someone with schizoaffective disorder. That is not helpful for somebody who has a medical condition like that. And so it's really important that you only get people to file their taxes who really aren't being chased by Canada Revenue Agency. And it's very easy to go in, of course, and find out with the tax filer whether they are being chased by the system. So some key pieces of advice are a surprise to people, and here's the parallel universe. I always tell low-income people to take early CPP unless they're on social assistance. Why? Because you take CPP early, it's lower. At 60, the maximum is $699, and for someone who takes that at 65, it's $1,300. Well, that CPP is going to reduce your GIS by 50 cents on the dollar. So what would you rather 50% taken off of at 65, $699 or $1,300? So you're going to have a lot more GIS if you, and of course you get the benefit of getting the CPP early. Again, only if you're not on OW or ODSP in Ontario. Only get on the grid after you've assessed what your creditors are actually doing. If you've got a bunch of people chasing you, you can't just put them into the tax system. And if you're well under 65, stop buying RSPs and cash in the ones you have and pay any taxes owing. Because if you're low income, your taxes are going to be low. But once you hit 65, the amount of money that's going to come off when you take your RSP out is 50 cents on the dollar off your GIS. Well, the highest tax in Canada is 46%. So I don't care how rich you are. If you're going to go on GIS, the amount of money that you're going to pay after 65 is going to be less, or the amount of your recovery on your income is going to be higher than the highest tax rate in Canada. So here's the parallel universe again. If you're over 65, consider using your RSP room to increase your GIS. What the banks tell you is take out the RSPs before 65 and then redeem them after 65, whereas I'm telling people to make sure that they don't go into them before 65 or cash out. And once they turn 65, then start turning on the RSP deduction, because it lowers their income for the purposes of GIS. And for every dollar they put into an RSP after 65, they're going to get 50 cents more in GIS. So it's a really good deal. And they can get that from 65 to 71. That's the window. And then the chariot's turned into a pumpkin at 71, and everybody's in RIFs. And that's for all of Canadians. So buy a TFSA if you have any savings in any investment grade instrument is allowable before age 65. And why a TFSA? Because it has no effect on GIS. It's only RRSPs that have to do that. So we need to address why correct advice is surprising. And moving on, we have reached 5 minutes earlier. You can go back to the last page. Put the one with the Mark Twain.
With the Mark Twain,
yeah,
right.
at the beginning.
Right.
That to me so much is
you left us on a cliffhanger there, John.
yeah, I should have put something at the end, requesting applause or something.
Yeah.
Like that. So anyways, we're at 10:56, so we're a tiny bit early.
Oh, that's great. That's fabulous, John. That was a lot of fabulous information. So you're bringing in quite a bit of your learnings from talking to various audiences, as well as this intersection with the retirement planning. And I wanted to mention as well for everyone who's listening with us today that John has updated his booklet on his website, the Low-Income Retirement Planning 4 Things to Think About booklet. He's updated it to July 2016. And that's on his website, and we're going to make sure and send everyone the link to it because it is available as a PDF for free. So we're going to make sure everyone gets that link with the whole host of information that he was just starting to allude to in the last couple of points.
But a shout out to Rotary for funding the Toronto Public Library for this.
Awesome.
But they prefer to stay in the background, and so we put the Toronto Public Library logo on this new one. The big difference here is there was a mistake in the first one that basically didn't include the 2012 change to CPP, where a 65-year-old can choose not to contribute to the Canada Pension Plan. You must contribute up to 65 if you're in employment or you've made the CPP election in self-employment. But once you turn 65, you can make the choice not to pay in, because the amount that your CPP is up by is something called a PRB, which is a post-retirement benefit system.
Oh, wow.
And so it's not actually CPP. But for people who are employees after age 65, it's a good deal to keep paying into the CPP if they're not on GIS, but if they are on GIS, it's not a good deal. And especially if they're contractors, which over half of seniors in Canada are self-employed contractors, because the big companies don't want to pay the employer portion of CPP and EI, and so it's a really bad deal for low-income contractors past 65 to pay into the post-retirement benefit. But the good news is that you can get a form on the web that says, I want to get out of my CPP, and you can give it to your employer, and they're obligated to cancel your CPP payroll contribution. And the other big thing is that Service Canada helpfully broke all their links to all the information. And so on the old material, if you click on the link, you'll get the dreaded 404, which is not the Don Valley Parkway above the 401. It's actually it's not the highway, it's the 404. That information can't be found. So we updated all the links. The other thing Service Canada did was it didn't have any forwarding links, so I had to look up each and every blessed one of the...
Well, thank you for doing that.
Yeah,
we appreciate it. Well, everyone, we do have another amount of time for questions. We have John till 11:30 or so. So if there's anything that you've been thinking about while listening to the session, or if there's anything that you would like John to go over again, if you just needed to hear it one more time, go ahead and type into the question box, and we'll see what we can do. This has been a really great presentation, John. This is so much information, and you've clearly been learning quite a lot each time you present the information. Do you have any questions? John, what would you say has been one of the most common questions that you've been getting lately? Is there anything that sort of has been a more recent change in your audiences, or is it sort of the same pattern year after year?
The same pattern, let's say from non-aged people, is the misunderstanding between non-refundable and refundable credits.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, on a lot of websites, and especially in political speeches, that each of the tax credits, which are very, very different, will be referred to simply as tax credits. Mm-hmm. In other words, you get a tax credit for your transit pass. You get a tax credit for working income, for example. And it's a real problem when you, for example, that people glaze over at the distinction between non-refundable credits and refundable credits. But
right.
if they understand the idea of a gift card versus a coupon, then they can start to see that it's a coupon. I keep saying over and over again, you got to buy Tide. You can't take
right.
the Tide coupon
right.
to the cashier.
Right.
And people really understand that. So if
Mm-hmm.
they can just use that and saying, well, I can only use that coupon to reduce my taxes, and if I don't pay any taxes because I'm on a benefit. I guess the one important one is that people, again, very, very resistant to actually getting out of their RRSPs because they'll have to pay the withholding tax of 10% at source, and they don't realize that if they're low income, they're going to get that 10% back. That is one that's a consistent one.
Maybe that would be something, if you want to say a couple more things about that challenge with the RRSP at that time when they could be eligible for their GIS, but why the RRSP it can be a problem for low income folks.
Well, again, the whole idea behind an RRSP, the whole idea behind it is that you're expecting to have higher income before you're 65 and then get the deduction, the RRSP deduction, and then you are, once you retire from work, then you'll be retiring on a lower income than 65. But for low income people, it's often the opposite, and that's what creates the parallel universe. If you're receiving ODSP, Ontario Works, or very modest earnings before 65, you're going to find that once you turn 65, that you're going to have a higher income. So if you have a higher income, an RRSP doesn't make any sense. The other point is that if you're low income before retirement, the deduction, which is based on how rich you are and how much you're paying in taxes, is of little use to you if you're hardly paying any tax in the first place. And as I said, the reduction on your GIS is 50%, and the people that you often see paying in and getting the RRSP deduction, they're getting 18% or 20%, and then turn around and have to pay 50% when it comes off So the government is really cashing in on that. The third thing is that for a lot of low-income people, the money that they receive before they turn 65 is non-taxable. ODSP is non-taxable. Ontario Works is non-taxable. All the refundable credits are non-taxable. Payments for awards of various sorts, in settlements, in structured settlements, in accident payoff, often are non-taxable. Guess what happens when you turn 65? Old age security is taxable. CPP is taxable. RRSP payouts are taxable. Pension sources are taxable. Earnings are taxable.
So all of a sudden they've got all this taxable income, and they weren't used to having.
Yeah, they were trading non-taxable income sources for taxable income sources. And so that's
a whole different ballgame.
Yeah. And the reason it's important to think about taking out an RRSP once you've turned 65, again the parallel universe, the reason for that is that the RRSP is a deduction for the purposes of GIS. And so for every $2 you put into an RRSP after 65, and if you're in the GIS zone, well, like lower than $17,000 in income, then your GIS is going to go up by 50 cents on every dollar that you contribute. Whereas the opposite is true if you take the RSP out before. So these are things that are not well known. They're not part of the landscape of our RSP season. They're not part of financial advice that's given out routinely in bank commercials and that sort of thing. My point is that if this is almost if it's almost one third of Canadians, then we have to figure out a way for this advice to come out. So that those folks are served. There's no such thing as RRSP season for a low-income person.
Of course. Yeah, unless they've turned 65 and they're cashing in their GIS.
That's right.
At that point, they can have RRSP. Got it. All right. Well, we haven't got any questions yet. I don't know if that's because we've just given you so much information that everyone's just absorbing it. Is there anything else? Oh, here we go. Oh, we have a question now. From Laylee. Thank you, Laylee. Laylee's asking, she helped someone file 10 years of back taxes, and he got a large refund, about $8,000 in credits and benefits. But he then found out, let's see, this is a good long question, Laylee. Thank you for all the detail. So he filed it 10 years of back taxes. He got $8,000 in a refund of credits and benefits, but then he told her that he owed about $18,000.
The Family Responsibility Office.
Yeah. So the question is, are all of those rewards from filing taxes that he got, will they be garnished?
Well, they can only be garnished if the person is actually working, because that's what garnishment is. But could the government go after him for the money that he owes to FRO because he gets a tax refund? You betcha. So, I mean, there's a cautionary tale there in terms of asking people what is chasing them. Now, maybe, and it depends again on what you think about in terms of whether somebody owes $18,000 for child support, then maybe they should be paying that if they can, and if they receive that money, maybe it's a good thing that they be able to help out their spouse or children, and especially if that family is receiving social assistance as a result of not getting child support, because the changes were just made this past year to exempt child support, so it would actually go into the pockets of the low-income person. But it's a perfect example of making sure that you really want to do this. Is there anything chasing you out there? And that's an important thing.
That's great. Thank you for asking that, Laylee. That's a really good specific example. Mark's got a question too. Thank you, Mark. If you had the power to change the system so that low-income people understand it better, what would be the first thing you would like to see changed? That's a great question.
There's two things that I would do. First of all, three things. First of all, I would do more popularization of the grocery store stuff and try to get people to understand it. The banks and financial institutions operate on extremely lavish advertising budgets to sell mutual funds and other products for various forms of tax instruments, but basically the work I do is I say it's on bake sale type funding. It certainly doesn't receive any money from government to do that, and that's it really important that should happen, because it's really important that happen, because there's 32% of Canadians. Again, this is a third of Canadians that need to understand this, especially as they move into their senior years. The second thing I do is I turn GIS into a tax credit, because then all the finance guys that are out there giving advice would be all over it, because the very same people who are quite willing to go in and get every scrap of tax credit that someone could get are often very antipathetic. In other words, they're against the idea of people putting themselves in the way of eligibility for entitlements, and that's because the word Entitlement is the E word. It's a word, oh, that's something you shouldn't get, and that's why I use a certificate of possession to say that. I guess the third thing that I would do, if I had the power to change things, I would make it mandatory to the people who are understanding, for the people who work in the banks, the public-facing people, the financial advisors, to actually understand this stuff. It's not in their courses. There's nothing on GIS if you go in to take a financial advisor type course, and yet it's, and I can at least say I got a meeting this afternoon with people who are involved in putting that course material together, and we may be starting to have some success in that. So fingers crossed.
All right. Well, thank you for that question, Mark. That's fabulous. Laylee, thank you for following up on your other questions. So Laylee was asking about this gentleman who got back the big refund, but then he owed in child support. So she's asking, will it make a difference if he has been on ODSP for many years? Will that affect anything?
Not ODSP itself. The child support guidelines go by income as opposed to source of income. So somebody could be on ODSP, and especially they're going to look at the person's overall income. So for example, the person, if they're earning and taking advantage of the $200 income exemption, and then the 50% offset on earnings, can have a single person can still be on ODSP even if their income is as high as $25,000 a year. So it's not, they're not going to look at the source of the income, they're going to look at the amount. And you've already said that the liability is $18,000. Just the fact that the person is on ODSP itself is not going to change anything. Okay. That has been fairly controversial though over the years, and so.
So it's a known problem.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. That's fabulous. Thank you, Laylee. Jyoti is asking, is there a penalty for over-contributing to RRSP and CPP?
It's hard to over-contribute to CPP. There's no penalty for over-contributing to CPP. It'll simply be, it would just be part of your refund. Okay. So you'll get people that will go into a particular job and then work at another job, and the two employers don't know anything about each other. So it would just simply, it would show up on the T4 tax return as an over-contribution, and it would simply be refunded to the person. Okay. So, and that, I believe that's also true for the employer. The employer would get some sort of refund, but I'm not as sure as that. But I've seen many instances of people getting to an RRSP. It's a bit more complicated. I just say, just don't do it. It's a bit of a luxury problem. If you got enough money to put in your RRSP and then you put too much in over your level. Certainly you're not going to get any credit for it. You're not going to get any deduction, but people were doing it years ago. I think there is now a modest penalty for over-contribution, but they warn you about it. You got a chance to usually warn you about it. You got a chance to get it out. Of course, if a person moved and they didn't get the warning and blah, blah, blah. Right. So it's really important. And again, those fee-based tax advisors, that fee resistance of low-income people, often the amount of money, I have examples of people, if they were simply paid somebody a few $100 to, which they almost will never do, to have their situation reviewed and get a bit of a financial makeover, they can save tens of thousands of dollars in GIS, or save tens of thousands of dollars in reduced, where they set their situation up where the money's not being confiscated from them, and yet they're fee resistant to paying a few $100s to get themselves on the right track. Sure. So this is rate of offset?
Yeah. So Laylee's asking, can you explain more on the right to offset by creditors?
Okay, right of offset, or which is the correct term. Sometimes it's called set off by others, so offset. What that means is, give you a few examples, is that if someone has money in their bank account, and then they go over on their credit card. Then if it's with the same set of banking institutions, usually, then the money can be taken out. And sometimes you sign something, and especially this happens with RESPs, unfortunately, people who have put money into an RESP, and then they take the money out, and then you have the $500 learning bond and the Canada Education Savings Grants there. Then of course it's the Government of Canada that will set that off and actually take that money back. But you'll also find it amongst institutions, and I wish I could say there was a general rule on right of offset. You really you have to look at the instrument itself and actually see if that right of offset is in the fine print. So you'll get that thing with a credit card, and you know, the 30-page thing with fine print that nobody can read or understand, and the right of offset is all on those pages, and the amounts and the penalties and all that sort of thing is there. Generally speaking, the more you lock something in, the harder it is to offset. So a creditor looking to get money and zip it out of your bank account or your registered instrument, it doesn't matter that something's registered. The right of offset can be there, but there's such things as LIRAs, which are locked-in retirement accounts. And when you have a locked-in retirement account, you have a great difficulty in getting it out. But also the creditor has just as much difficulty getting it out. Locked-in retirement accounts for low-income people only work in, or really work in one instance, and that is someone, I saw a case last year actually at HouseLink where someone had a very significant LIRA but was able to stay on ODSP because the person had no right to the money. They couldn't get it out. So when they put it in a LIRA at some time previously, which was done actually by a parent who was concerned about their adult child, that they were actually able to keep that money even though it was well over the ODSP asset limit. So locked-in retirement accounts, LIRAs, are sometimes a good idea for someone who is going to go on benefits during their lifetime. And of course, then they can take the LIRA out when they turn 65 or whatever the rules happen to say for the LIRA. So a LIRA is not just an old Italian money. It's a LIRA is actually a particular type of RRSP.
Oh, okay. So the right to offset, you're saying that's a really specific question as far as the specific kind of account or the specific kind of financial instrument about how easily.
Yeah, and it's very important that before people take out registered instruments of any kind, that if they're not going to read the fine print, at least ask the question. Is there right of offset on this particular instrument? So there's generally speaking, and here again is one of these things that people understand, that the money can't be taken out by a creditor from a registered instrument. That's a very widespread belief, but it's one of those Mark Twain things that we know for sure that just aren't so. Money can be taken out of the register.
So if they gotta make sure to ask those questions and maybe get someone to help them read the fine print if nothing else.
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, we have a few more minutes. If you're thinking about any more questions, or if there's anything that you've thought of to do with some folks you've seen one-on-one to do problem-solving work with them, let us know in the next couple minutes. But also, if you think about a question later on, send us an email and we'll connect with John. We also we know that John is a great resource for this kind of information, and so we're happy to have John back for another session, and I know he's certainly open to coming back for another session, maybe in a couple months' time. So if you're interested in anything more to do with the tax credit topic or the retiring on a low income topic, we're definitely happy to set up another session for everyone here, and we're always aware that this is the kind of topic that is it's easy to learn over and over again. You always remember more the more you get exposed to it, because there's so many different little pieces of information. Like you said, John, 287 people or so couldn't clearly identify the definition. So it's certainly worth coming back to over and over again.
Yeah, and I'd just like to remind everyone that when I ask people in the branches, the people who come in for retirement on a low income, the only age limit is the upper age limit of 71. There's really nothing you can do for somebody after 71 because everything's baked in. But often people think that there's nothing they can do once they reach 65, whereas they can, if they're low income, start taking out an RSP. One of the things that I say to people is, I ask, does everybody remember their notice of assessment? Now, something that's a good thing is that most people know what that is, that there is something that gets sent to them after they file their taxes. Then I ask the crucial question, do you know where it is? And a whole bunch of people do not put up their hands. But some do. And I said, what is at the bottom of the second page on your notice of assessment? And actually about half the places somebody will say, oh, there's a statement of what your RRSP room is. And what I start to say to people at all of these sessions is, your RRSP room is a gold mine. Now, for low-income people, most of them who have earned the RRSP room by working over their lifetime, they have tended not to use their RRSP room, like apply for RRSPs, which is good news for low-income people. But it still means they have that big amount of money, and I often see very poor people who have been on benefits for years, will often have RRSP room of $20, $30, $40, $50, $70,000.
Wow.
And these are amounts, of course, that if they're in the GIS zone, once they turn 65, and for a single person, again, it's about $17,400 in income other than old age security. So keep old age security out of the equation. But if you're going to get less than $17,000 a year as a single person, from the total of CPP, pension, RSP cash outs, earnings, other things, then that amount is, then you're GIS bound, and if you're GIS bound, you can use that RSP room to take out an RSP once you turn 65 and get a whole lot more GIS. And of course, the next question after that is, well, who's going to loan me money to take out an RSP? And I don't have any money. And the question is, if you go to a bank and say, I want to take out an RSP loan, and I'm going to leave the RSP here, so you're leaving your collateral at the bank, you'd be surprised at how many banks will loan money to people who are low income because the collateral remains at the branch. I mean, so of course you'll sign the right of offset if you don't pay it off. Oh, wow. And of course, when you get your much bigger GIS credit, that's when you can start paying off the RSP loan. Okay,
all right, that's fantastic. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for listening in this morning. This has been a great session. John, I know all of us listening here have definitely been listening very closely to every word. It's been great. Thank you, everyone, for attending and for sharing your time with us this morning. We're going to be in touch with the slides and the recording from this session so that you can have it to keep and refer back to for anything you've forgotten or missed. And we'll also make sure to send you the links to John's website with his publications, as well as a link to
library.
The library sessions. Like John's been mentioning, he gives this presentation to audiences in local libraries for free. So if you want to hear more, we'll make sure you get that list of dates and times. They're going into October and November.
That's right, and at the libraries are handing out paper copies of the material, which is otherwise you'd have to print it all out.
Okay.
And probably not in color.
Probably not in color. All right. So thanks so much, everyone. We're going to sign out today, and we'll be in touch with all of the follow-up information from the session. Hope you have a great day, and take care.